I hadn't been inside the house since the funeral. It was one of those overcast days where even the birds seemed like they're waiting for something bad to happen. The key turned in the lock with a dry, reluctant click, and the door creaked open like it was surprised to see anyone again. The air inside was stale, still holding on to years of dust and reheated coffee and old man cologne that had long since turned sour. The place was exactly how I remembered it, only smaller, quieter. Grandpa's recliner still sat in front of the old Zenith TV like a shrine, the seat cushion permanently slouched, the armrests worn smooth by years of elbows. His coat hung by the door, even though he hadn't gone anywhere in years. The kitchen light buzzed when I flipped the switch. It always did that. He left it all to me. The house, the junk inside it, the little bit of money he hadn't already buried in the utility bills or whatever off-brand bourbon he drank. The lawyer said Grandpa had handwritten a will about 6 years ago, witnessed and signed. Apparently he never told anyone. I was the only one he mentioned by name. I found a note. It was tucked inside a small envelope, on top of the kitchen counter. Just 2 sentences. There's something in the basement. I'm sorry I didn't destroy it. No salutation, no signature. Just that. I didn't go down there right away. Instead, I moved through the house like a stranger, trying not to disturb anything. Every room felt paused, like it was waiting for the old man to shuffle back in with a grunt and, "What are you doing?" The living room still had that little stack of yellowing crossword puzzle books on the coffee table. The dining room had a single chair pushed back like someone had just stood up. His bedroom smelled like mothballs and loneliness. I found the first journal upstairs, in the drawer where he used to keep old rubber bands and mismatched cufflinks. It was a black leather notebook, cracked at the spine, full of his handwriting, his real handwriting. The kind from before when his hand started shaking. Dates at the top of each entry. Some were decades old. I flipped to the first page and read until the sun started bleeding through the blinds. It wasn't what I expected. No grocery lists. No boring grandpa stuff. It read like a man bleeding onto paper little by little. Stories from his youth. Regrets. Memories of Grandma. How her voice sounded in the morning. How her absence had turned the house into a tomb. He talked about solitude like it was a roommate, not a condition. Something he had invited in and never asked to leave. By the third journal, I found 5 total, stacked in a cardboard box beneath his bed. He started mentioning the visions, just tossed off casually like I'd know what that meant. He wrote about the weight of knowing too much, about images he couldn't forget, people in his life caught in moments that hadn't happened yet. I asked the questions I never should have. I thought I wanted answers. I didn't understand the cost. No further explanation. Just page after page of his handwriting getting shakier, sloppier, and more frantic. The tone turned cold around the time Grandpa died. His entries became shorter, sometimes single sentences. It's still down there. The images won't stop. I saw myself dying alone. I was right. That was when I decided to go into the basement. The door was in the hallway next to the laundry room. I opened it slowly. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight like they didn't trust me. The basement smelled like every basement. Damp, moldy, full of trapped decades. But under it all was something else. Something sharper, like ozone after lightning. There was only one bulb dangling from a frayed cord. I had to pull it twice before it flickered on. The light caught on cobwebs, cardboard boxes, metal shelving units stacked with dusty jars and broken appliances. And in the far corner, Under a ratty beige dropcloth sat a television. Old, heavy, wood panel casing with rounded corners. No brand name. Dials instead of buttons. The rabbit ears pointed straight up like a warning. There was something off about it. It hummed faintly, like it was holding in a breath. I stepped closer. My reflection in the curved glass was distorted. Longer, thinner. The kind of shape that makes you question if it's really your reflection at all. A notebook rested on top of it. I picked it up and flipped through a few pages. It was full of notes. Not just entries. Logs. Names. Dates. Descriptions, times. Each entry started with a name and a timestamp. Each described an event. Some mundane, some tragic. Some that hadn't happened yet. I closed the book, looked at the TV. It wasn't plugged in. Still. The screen flickered. Just for a second. A face. Mine. I blinked hard, stepped back, and stared at the screen. It was dark again. Just dead glass now. I waited, holding my breath, like maybe if I stood still long enough, it would come back. Nothing. I told myself it was nothing. Static burn-in. The light playing tricks. Hell, maybe I was just seeing things. This old house had a way of making your skin itch when you stood still too long. Old places did that. They carry weight. Still, I crouched down and looked behind the TV. The plug dangled, limp and dusty. Never touched the wall. No batteries, no backup power, nothing. That hum, though. It was gone now. I didn't realize how much I'd noticed it until the quiet hit. I left the basement light on. I didn't care. Some part of me didn't want that space going dark again just yet. Back upstairs, I dropped the notebook onto the kitchen table and stared at it while my coffee brewed. Cheap grocery store brand stuff Grandpa always drank. Tasted like dirt and sadness. But I couldn't bring myself to change the routine yet. The notebook was different from the journals I found earlier. The others were personal, sad, scattered, written by a man slowly falling into himself. But this one? This was clinical, organized, dated, almost like a scientist or a researcher had kept it. January 12, 1998, 4:45 p.m. Linda Myers, crossing 5th and Baldwin, trips on sidewalk crack, breaks left wrist, yells at stranger who tries to help her, blames poor city maintenance. March 2nd, 1999, 10:02 a.m. Saw Thompson's boy playing with matches behind his dad's shop. Predictable outcome. May 27th, 2001, 8:15 p.m. Nancy's dog gets loose. Makes it 3 blocks before the semi. She'll bury it under the maple tree out back. I flipped pages faster now, entry after entry, all small, all local. And people I barely remembered from when I was a kid. The kind of names that float around town like dust. Always there, even if you don't know the details. And sprinkled between them were entries Grandpa wrote about himself. I asked it about Margaret today. Saw her sitting by the window, knitting, still alive. Happier. It lied. Asked it about me. Saw myself alone, still here. Still riding, same chair, older and tired. Saw the house empty. Dust everywhere. That means I go before the house does. Maybe that's mercy. I spent the rest of the day cleaning out the upstairs bedroom. My new room, I guess. Took the old floral curtains, wiped the dust off the dresser. Didn't bother touching Grandma's room. Not yet. That one still felt sacred. Or maybe cursed. I hadn't decided. When night fell, the house got loud. Creaks, moans, old boards expanding and contracting like lungs. And underneath it all, the low tick of the kitchen clock, steady as a heartbeat. Too steady. Made me miss my city noise. I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows stretch and collapse with every passing car outside. The notebook sat on the nightstand, its cover turned toward me like it was watching. Eventually I gave up, threw on a hoodie, padded barefoot down the hallway past Grandpa's empty recliner, and opened the basement door again. The light was still on. The TV hadn't moved. It looked like it had been waiting. I approached slowly, half expecting the screen to flicker again the moment I got close. Nothing. I crouched beside it, fingers brushing against the coarse dial. It clicked when I turned it on. The sound was thick and satisfying, like old tech should be. I adjusted the antenna. Nothing but static. Then the screen pulsed once, then again, and then there was an image. It was faint, like looking through a foggy window, but I knew what I was seeing. The kitchen. My kitchen from this house. The same countertop, the same ugly wallpaper with a faded fruit pattern. The shot was angled from above, like there was a camera in the corner of the ceiling that didn't exist. I saw myself. Making coffee, same hoodie, same tired posture. I reached out toward the screen as if touching it would confirm it was real. The version of me on the screen stirred the mug, then set it down. Then he looked up. Not at the camera. At me. Staring at the screen like he knew. I stumbled back, my heart racing, but the image kept going, like I hadn't noticed anything strange. I, checked my phone, yawned, then sat down at the kitchen table. The clock on the wall in the footage read 8:13 a.m. I glanced at my phone. 12:42 a.m. This hadn't happened yet. I went to bed. I didn't dream, but I woke up feeling like I had. Something clung to me, a pressure, like I'd been breathing underwater all night. It was already late morning by the time I rolled out of bed. The sun was cutting through the windows like it didn't belong here. Too sharp, too clean for a place so dusty. I spent most of the day in silence. No music, no TV. Just me and the old bones of the house. I made a coffee at 8:10 a.m. A few minutes later, I felt as if something was watching me and I looked up. Nothing was there, but I felt like I was seeing something. And then I remembered. I saw myself do the same exact routine the other night. I looked at the clock on the wall and it read 8:13 a.m. Right on time. I brushed it off and continued with my errands for the day, my routine. I replaced the shower curtain that had gone brittle and yellow. I took down some old picture frames and stacked them in a closet. I cleaned out the fridge and found a bottle of Grandpa's bourbon hidden behind a milk carton dated last year. A bird hit the window in the afternoon. It flew away, but left a small feather and a smear of something behind. Omen, if I believed in that kind of thing. I didn't go into the basement again. Not that day. That night, I lay in bed reading more of Grandpa's journals. One passage hit me harder than I expected. Sometimes it shows you what you want. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just shows. I stared at those words until they blurred into the paper, until the spaces between them started to feel like they were hiding something more important than the sentences themselves. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I finally turned off the light. But I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, and underneath it all, under the creaks, the ticks, the wind outside, I swear I heard the soft hiss of static. Morning again, brighter, colder. I went downstairs out of instinct, without even thinking about it. Just drawn. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that the TV hadn't actually turned on the night before. But it was waiting for me. Same spot, same hum, the same warped reflection in the screen. I stood in front of it for a while, the silence hanging thick around me. Then I said, without fully meaning to, "Grandpa said you don't always show the truth." Nothing. "You ever lie to him?" The TV didn't flicker. The static stayed dead. "I read the journals," I continued, arms crossed. "I know you showed him Margaret. You showed him himself. You showed him things he couldn't stop thinking about. Was that on purpose?" The words left my mouth heavier than I expected. Like they'd picked up weight on the way out, dragging down the air with them. I didn't know why I said it. Not really. It just felt like something that needed to be said. Even if I was talking to an empty screen in an old unplugged box of parts that shouldn't even be able to turn on, let alone listen. I waited for something, anything. A flicker, a sound. Even just a pop of static like I'd imagined hearing the night before. But nothing came. The screen stayed black and inert, and the glass reflected my face back at me with a kind of warped indifference, like it was cataloging me and filing me away for later. I stared at my own distorted eyes and the curve of that old tube and thought about all the things Grandpa must have seen, all the moments that had hollowed him out one at a time, until he'd become the quiet, rigid silhouette I remembered from the end. I thought about the journals, about how his neat handwriting had slowly turned into the scribbled edge of madness, about how he'd shifted from talking about people and places and memories to logging timestamps and names like he was just trying to keep track of a world that had slipped his leash. I ran my hand across the top of the TV, felt the dust stick to my fingers, and realized it wasn't just dust. It was age. Years of silence. Years of waiting. Maybe for someone else. Maybe for me. "I read what he wrote," I said quietly, almost to myself, although the words were clearly meant for the thing in front of me. About how it started slow. About how at first it was just small things. Little glimpses into what might happen next. Like the world was offering him a peek behind the curtain if he knew where to look and what to ask for. And then it started showing him more. People he knew, people he cared about. Things that hadn't happened yet. Things he didn't want to know. Still, no response. Not even a flicker of light or that mechanical hum I swore I'd heard the first time. But the room didn't feel quiet. It felt like it was listening. "He thought he could use you," I went on, my voice low, flat, steady in the same way that you talk to wild animals or loaded guns. "He thought if he asked the right questions, he could change things, make sense of things. But that's not how it works, is it? You don't give people what they need. You give them what you want them to see." I waited again, longer this time. I stood there in that cold, cramped space with the concrete floor under my feet and the pipes above my head. And for a moment, I almost felt stupid. Standing there talking to a piece of furniture like it was going to answer me. But something in my gut wouldn't let me leave just yet. I turned to go, one foot already on the bottom stair, and then I heard it. So sharp, so sudden, so precise that it punched the air out of my chest. Click. That thick, mechanical click of a dial turning. Unmistakable, undeniable. The kind of sound that doesn't happen on accident, and sure as hell doesn't happen from a dead machine. I turned around, slow, like my bones were reluctant to see what my eyes already knew. The screen had come to life again. Not with static this time, but with motion, color, clarity. The picture was clean. Too clean for a machine that should have barely made its black and white. It was a dashboard view, slightly elevated, like it had been filmed from some impossible angle in the corner of the windshield. I could see trees rushing past, sunlight spilling through them in golden shafts. I could hear the soft hum of the road, tires humming gently over the pavement, and the low sound of music playing from the radio. And then I saw her. Claire, my sister, sitting behind the wheel, tapping the steering wheel with her fingers in rhythm with the song. She was wearing the green hoodie she always stole from me when she visited, sunglasses perched on her head, her expression relaxed, like she wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just driving, just existing in a moment she didn't know she was being watched. I stepped closer, heart hammered in my chest, and watched as the car turned onto a road that looked familiar. Too familiar. I leaned in, stared past her shoulder, and saw it. Saw the house, my house, Grandpa's house. The same cracked driveway, the same leaning mailbox. She was there. Or she would be, or... I didn't know when this was. She parked the car, turned off the engine, reached over and picked up a white gift bag from the passenger seat. Tissue paper crumpled neatly on top. The handle looped around her wrist, and then she got out. The picture followed her as she walked up the path. It was smooth, intentional, like a camera operator was floating behind her with a steady hand. She climbed the steps, paused, smiled nervously, and reached for the doorbell. In the basement, on that impossibly perfect screen, I watched her press the button, and upstairs, the sound came. A clear, echoing chime from the front door. The real front door, the doorbell ringing. I stood there for a second, frozen in the doorway at the top of the basement stairs, trying to convince myself that what I'd seen hadn't really happened. That maybe I'd fallen asleep down there with all the dust and dead air and imagined the whole thing. But the doorbell rang again, and this time it pulled me like a hook through the chest. I opened the front door. There she was, exactly like on the screen. Green hoodie, sunglasses in her hair, white gift bag in hand, a little flush from the cold. Same nervous smile, like she wasn't sure if I'd actually wanted her there. "Hey, you! I hope I'm not interrupting your hermit phase." I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat, like there was still static there, humming beneath my skin. I forced a smile, stepped back, and gestured her in. She walked past me into the living room, her eyes sweeping over the furniture, the peeling wallpaper, the way the dust curled in the slats of light like smoke. "Gosh, this place hasn't changed a bit. Smells like... what? Coffee and old wood?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Grandpa's cologne is probably baked into the walls." She dropped the gift bag on the coffee table and turned to face me, pulling her sleeves down over her hands like she used to when we were kids, and she felt awkward. "I didn't know if I should come. You didn't really text back." "Yeah, sorry, I've been distracted." "I get it," she said, and for a second I think she really did. "It's weird, isn't it? Being in here without him? Without Grandma? I used to think this house would always feel the same without them, but now it just feels hollow." I nodded, but my eyes kept drifting toward the hallway, toward the basement. She followed my gaze. "What's down there? You look like you saw a ghost." "Just junk, old stuff. You know how Grandpa was." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You look like you're about to bolt." I tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "I've just been reading some of his journals. He left a lot of them behind. It's pretty heavy stuff." She moved toward the kitchen, opened the fridge, and made a face. "Geez, when did this milk expire?" "Around the same time CDs were still a thing." She laughed and leaned against the counter. "You thinking about selling the place? Or are you going to do the whole mysterious heir to the creepy old house routine?" I shrugged. "I don't know, it's mine now. It feels weird, you know? He left everything to me." Claire looked at me for a long second. "You were always his favorite?" "I don't think he really had favorites," I said, though even as I said it, I knew that wasn't true. Grandpa and I had something. Not warm exactly, but real. He barely spoke to me after Grandma died. Stopped calling, stopped answering. Mom said he just went dark. He did. I felt that pressure again. The one I'd felt last night in bed. Like the air in the house knew things it wasn't saying. He was dealing with stuff. The way he talked about her in his journals. It's like losing her cracked him open. Claire nodded. Maybe. Or maybe he just got tired of people. Grief does weird things to the way you see everyone else. She didn't press. She didn't ask about the basement again. I think she could tell I wasn't ready to talk about it, even if I wanted to. We spent a few more minutes talking about surface-level things. Her job, mom, traffic, weather. She didn't stay long. She said she just wanted to drop by and check on me, let me know I wasn't alone. The bag she'd brought had some cookies, a candle, and a framed photo of the two of us when we were little. Christmas, probably. I didn't remember the moment, but the expressions were real. When she left, I watched her car pull out of the driveway and disappear down the street. Then I stood in the hallway, listening. No wind, no birds. Just that soft, impossible hiss from the basement. The next morning didn't feel real. It was one of those days where the light comes in too soft, like the sun doesn't want to wake you either. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before I got out of bed, eyes tracking the cracks like they might spell something if I looked hard enough. My mind kept looping back to the night before. Claire's visit, the basement, the screen. I didn't tell myself it didn't happen. Not exactly. But I tried to think about it like a dream you can't quite shake. Like my brain was just feeding off all the grief and weird energy in this place and stitching it into hallucinations. People see faces in the clouds, shapes and static. Maybe I'd seen what I wanted to see. Not that that makes any sense. I mean, the image of her on that screen stepping out of her car with the gift bag in hand played over and over like it was burning at the back of my eyelids. And the sound of the doorbell hitting in perfect sync. That part I couldn't rationalize. I didn't go down to the basement all day. I made breakfast, threw out more of Grandpa's old food, looked through some of the boxes I hadn't touched yet. The hours passed slowly, the way they do when you're avoiding something, like the clock knows and stretches time just to mock you. By the time the sun started to fall, casting long, bruised shadows across the kitchen floor, I knew I was going to do it. I didn't admit it out loud. I just found myself standing at the top of the basement stairs with a flashlight in one hand and my jaw clenched tight. I descended one step at a time, slow, careful, like the air might snap if I moved too fast. The TV was waiting for me, same as before. Still unplugged, still warm. I sat down in front of it, cross-legged on the concrete like a kid about to watch Saturday morning cartoons, and stared into that dull, blank screen for a long while. My breath fogged the air a little. The temperature was always cooler down here, but tonight it felt colder than usual. "Okay," I said, voice louder than I meant it to be in the quiet space. "Let's stop dancing around it." I cleared my throat, eyes locked on the black curve of the glass. "Show me tomorrow's news. Give me something I can check, something I can prove," I said. Nothing happened. Not right away. Click. The sound was sharp, mechanical, familiar now. The dial shifted itself again. The screen lit up. There was static at first. Not the usual white hiss, but something darker, like water boiling in reverse, colors swimming under the surface. Then it flickered, resolved, and cleared. A newsroom. Not one I recognized. Cheap set, muted colors, the kind of broadcast you'd catch at 5 a.m. if you left the TV on overnight. The anchor was mid-sentence, calm but serious, speaking with the measured cadence of someone used to reading tragedy off a teleprompter. "Injuries were reported. but the explosion rocked several city blocks and has left officials scrambling to identify the cause. Authorities say they will hold a press conference at noon tomorrow with more details, but so far, they've confirmed that no foul play is suspected, despite the usual chemical signatures found at the site. The screen cut to footage of a building, a brick warehouse, half its roof gone, black smoke pouring from the wreckage. Sirens in the distance, firefighters milling around in confusion. The headline on the bottom of the screen read, "Warehouse explosion, Halpern District. 1 confirmed dead, 4 injured." I stared at the image, heart racing. I didn't know the building, didn't know the district. The name of the network wasn't familiar either. KTCN 12. Not local. The timestamp in the corner said 8:02 p.m., and the date was tomorrow. Not next week, not sometime. Tomorrow. And then it ended. Just flickered out. The screen went dark again, like nothing had ever been there at all. I sat there for a long time, the silence thick in my ears, and trying to tell myself what I'd seen didn't matter. But it did. Because tomorrow I'd know. I didn't go near the basement that day. It wasn't fear exactly, it was something quieter, more insidious. Like if I left the thing alone long enough, it might forget about me, might go back to sleep. But it stayed with me anyway, in the way I caught myself glancing at dark corners for no reason, and how my skin prickled when the fridge kicked on too loud, and the way I flinched when the mail slot opened. The image of that warehouse played in my head like a silent loop, smoke curling upward, the reporter's voice muted but now still present in my thoughts. I thought I could hear it even when I wasn't trying to. I waited all day for someone to text me, distract me, something, but no one did. Claire hadn't followed up. No one else even knew I was here. By 6 o'clock, the silence was unbearable. I opened my laptop, connected to the old shaky Wi-Fi Grandpa had barely used, and started searching. Nothing smart, just gut instinct. TV that shows the future? Old TV predicts real events? CRT television paranormal? It was mostly junk, clickbait. Reddit threads full of people making jokes about cursed VHS tapes, haunted VCRs, and lost media. A few short stories on Creepypasta forums. But nothing that matched the sharpness, the truth of what I'd seen. Still, I ended up on a forum. Some paranormal, barely active message board that looked like it hadn't updated its layout since 2009. Black background, neon green text. Posts with usernames like Voidman47 and Ghost Radios. I stared at the blank, new thread box for a while. Then I started typing. Subject: Old TV shows things that haven't happened yet, and things that are currently happening. Real? Thread: Not sure where to post this. I don't even know if I believe what I'm seeing. I inherited a house from a family member. Guy was a shut-in for the last 10 years. In the basement, there's this old TV. Not plugged in, no cables, doesn't matter. It turns on anyway. First time it showed me someone I know driving up to my home. A minute later, she knocked on my door. Exact same outfit, same bag in her hand. Like it was watching her before she arrived. Last night, I asked it to show me the news for the next day. Some warehouse explosion. People hurt. I don't even know where the place is. I'm not making this up. I haven't told anyone. Just want to know if anyone's seen anything like this before. Could use a little help. Or even just say, "You're not crazy." I read it over 3 times before hitting post. Then I closed the lid like it might burn me if I stared too long. The clock on the wall read 7:42 p.m. I made dinner. Burned toast, half a can of beans, a beer that tasted like metal. Sat at the kitchen table like I was waiting for a phone call from the other side. Every time the fridge kicked on, I looked toward the basement door. At 7:59, I turned on Grandpa's old TV upstairs, the one in the living room he never got rid of, even after flat screens took over the world. I flipped channels slowly, looking for something local, something live. At 8:02, I landed on KTCN 12. The anchor's face was exactly the same. So was his voice, word for word. He kept talking, but I couldn't hear him anymore. My pulse pounded in my ears, and I sank into the couch without meaning to, mouth dry, hands cold. There it was. Same warehouse footage, same sirens, same smoke. The TV had shown it all the night before. No tricks, no metaphors, just the future plain and clear. Real. I turned off the TV and sat in the dark. The static wasn't in the room. It was in me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I just sat in Grandpa's recliner, the warehouse explosion playing on repeat in my head. The way the smoke curled, the tone of the anchor's voice, the same words I'd heard the night before, word for word, the same building, same fire, same silence afterward. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't some lucky guess or deja vu. The TV had shown me the future. There was no walking that back now. And still, I didn't go downstairs. I didn't need to. Because now I was starting to understand something. The TV didn't just respond to me. It chose what it showed. That first time, Claire. That was personal, intimate. Like it was saying, I know you. I know what matters to you. The news? That was just proof. Bait. To make me believe. And it worked. The next day I cut to myself. I ate cereal with no milk. I ignored the text Claire sent about a movie we both used to like. I checked the forum post. No replies. At some point I found myself staring at the basement door again, hand resting on the knob, not turning it, just feeling the cool metal against my palm. I told myself, don't go down until it calls you again. I lasted until nightfall. The sky had just begun to melt into that deep, iron-colored dusk, the kind that makes the windows into mirrors and blurs the edges of everything. When I found myself standing in the hallway outside the basement door, I wasn't holding a flashlight. I wasn't even really thinking. My body had moved on its own, like the house had leaned toward me and I had simply leaned back. The handle was cold beneath my fingers, the same way it had been that first night. Only this time, it felt almost familiar. Less like a warning and more like a recognition. Like it remembered me and was waiting. The door opened with the usual creak, hinges complaining into the quiet, and I stood at the top of the stairs for a moment, listening. I thought I might hear the hum again, the strange, low vibration I'd convinced myself was my imagination. But there was nothing. Just silence. Still. It pulled at me, soft and patient. I descended slowly, letting the wooden steps take my weight one at a time, the air growing colder with each one. By the time I reached the concrete floor, I felt like I was stepping into a version of the house that lived beneath the house I'd inherited. Same structure, same dimensions, but hollowed out. Repurposed for something else. The TV hadn't moved. It sat in its usual place. An unblinking, inert relic. Screen dark and dull. It wasn't on, and it hadn't made a sound. But somehow I knew it had been listening anyway. I didn't sit right away. I stood there, just watching it, hands in my hoodie pocket, heart pressing against my ribs in a slow, persistent rhythm that made the silence feel heavier than it should have. The basement felt like it was holding its breath. I waited. And then, without really deciding to, I spoke. Show me Claire. There was a moment, maybe a second, maybe longer, where nothing happened. And I thought for just an instant that I'd imagined everything. That it had all been grief and stress and sleep deprivation. That maybe I was finally starting to unravel like Grandpa had. Then came the click. That heavy, unmistakable mechanical click of the dial shifting. Like the TV had considered the request, weighed the cost, and decided I was worth obliging. The screen lit up. A gentle wash of light blooming into focus, and there she was, Claire, sitting cross-legged on her couch, a blanket over her lap, a bowl in her hands. She was eating something, watching a show I couldn't see, the soft blue flicker of it casting light on her face. She laughed, head tilting just the way it always had since we were kids, and for a moment I just watched, feeling something close to comfort bloom in my chest. Then, without warning, she paused. She didn't react to anything on her show. She didn't flinch or startle. She simply lifted her head and turned, just slightly, and looked straight at me. Or not straight at me, but through me. Like her eyes had found me on the other side. The look lasted only a second, and maybe less, but I felt it like a cold hand sliding between my ribs. She returned to her food like nothing had happened. I turned off the basement light and went back upstairs, careful not to look over my shoulder as I climbed. The next day passed in pieces. I woke up late, still in my clothes from the night before. I made coffee I didn't drink, stared out the window at nothing in particular, half aware of the dust motes floating through the beams of sunlight cutting across the floor. Outside, the world moved on. Normal, unaware, unbothered. I didn't go to the basement right away. I told myself I wouldn't, that I needed space. That it was just a coincidence or stress or some trick of the light in mind. I spent an hour trying to organize the books on the shelves in the front room before realizing I wasn't even reading the titles. Just touching them, moving them, killing time. By late afternoon, I'd stopped pretending. I was already on the stairs before I fully admitted I was going. This time I didn't hesitate. I descended with purpose, almost like I was headed into a workshop or a lab. Something important, private. The air was cool, still carrying that faint electrical hum that I swore I could feel more than hear. The TV sat where it always did, patient, waiting, and when I approached it, it came to life without a word. No question, no command. Just a click. Just static blooming into image. The screen showed a living room. Small, neat, familiar in a way I couldn't immediately place. A girl sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, thumb moving in lazy circles. Her hair was longer now, but I knew her. Maya. We'd gone out during college for a few months. Nothing serious, or so I told myself back then. I hadn't thought about her in a long time, but here she was, on my screen, live, real, just existing. She didn't know she was being watched. That part sank in slow and heavy, but it didn't stop me from watching. She looked up at something someone said off screen, her roommate maybe. She smiled, laughed, said something I couldn't hear, and the feed cut out before I could figure out what. Another click. A new image. A man at a gas station leaning on the counter talking to the cashier. I didn't recognize him. His eyes were tired. His voice was muted, urgent, animated. Probably a story, probably nothing. Click. Another feed. A woman doing dishes in a house I vaguely remembered visiting once when I was a kid. My third grade teacher, maybe? Her hands moved methodically through soap and water, a radio murmuring in the background. She looked over her shoulder suddenly, and for a split second I thought she saw me. But no. She just reached for a towel. Click. Another. It was Kelsey from high school. We'd hooked up a few times, sloppy and drunk and full of bad ideas. She was brushing her hair in the mirror now, focused and quiet. The room around her was dimly lit. wallpaper peeling near the ceiling. She sang softly to herself, lips moving to some song I couldn't hear. I watched her longer than I should have. The feed cut out. Another click, another life. The images kept coming faster now, like the TV had opened a floodgate. I started whispering names between scenes just to see if it would respond, if it was reacting to me. And it was. Every time I said a name, the screen flickered and showed them. No delay, no hesitation. Some I hadn't thought about in years, some I barely knew. It didn't matter. If I remembered them, the TV could find them. I saw an old friend's dad in his garage, chain-smoking in silence. I saw my first kiss, curled up in bed beside someone I didn't recognize. I saw a former coworker asleep on the bus, mouth hanging open. My old boss, my landlord, my cousin, a girl I used to work with in high school. Every face, every life shown to me like I had a right to it. At some point, I realized I was smiling. It wasn't about knowing the future anymore. It was about knowing everything. The more I watched, the easier it became to forget time. Nights blurred into each other, each one marked not by sunrises or sleep, but by the flicker of the screen and the slow, deliberate shifting of lives not my own. I'd sit in front of the TV for hours, sometimes without even speaking, and it would show me everything. It had become intuitive, responsive, like we were building a connection. When I thought of someone, the screen would often change before I could say their name out loud. Like the thought was enough. I watched an old friend from middle school walk his dog through a foggy neighborhood I didn't recognize, earbuds in, looking more tired than I remembered. I watched a girl I used to text late at night in bed alone, phone resting on her chest, staring at the ceiling like she was waiting for something that wasn't coming. I saw my old boss eating dinner in silence, chewing slowly while the TV in his background played some cooking show he wasn't really watching. He looked smaller than I remembered, lonelier. And I started looking for those moments, the cracks in people, the versions of themselves no one else saw, the habits, the slips, the little breakdowns when no one was around. I didn't want their smiles, I wanted their truth. And every night I got it. It was beautiful, private, like I had been given a key to the back of everyone's mind. There was something addictive about that feeling. Quiet, complete, and deeply untouchable. Like I could slip into lives without ever having to carry their weight. I didn't want anything from them, not really. Not apologies, not closure, not even connection. I just wanted to see them as they were when no one else was watching. To peel back the layers and catch those small, unrehearsed moments that made them real. The TV gave me that, night after night without fail. I knew it wasn't right. I told myself it wasn't about control or power, that I wasn't hurting anyone, that I was just curious. It was harmless and human. But underneath that lie was something far simpler, and I was getting closer to admitting it. I liked it. I liked the distance. I liked the silence. I liked being the only one who knew. And when the screen gave me something new, something bigger, I was ready for it. That night, the glow from the basement was already waiting by the time I reached the bottom step. It wasn't a soft flicker like before. It was steady, intentional, like it had turned itself on and kept burning just to pull me back. I didn't sit down right away. I stood at the edge of the light, watching the image shift into focus. A newsroom. Muted colors. A ticker crawling beneath the anchor's stern face. The camera angle was still, but the urgency in her eyes said everything. Emergency responders still working to contain the fire. Reports indicate more than 30 injured, at least 7 confirmed dead after malfunction at the Rosley chemical plant outside Detroit. 7 dead and 30 injured. I didn't move. The footage cut to helicopter shots, smoke pouring from a collapsed building. Emergency vehicles clustered in rows like toys scattered in panic. Bodies on stretchers, faces blurred. The kind of carnage you only see once it's been cleared for broadcast. The corner of the screen read, Wednesday, 7:14 a.m. I looked at my phone. It was Tuesday, 11:09 p.m. I stood there and watched it again. The anchor, the footage, the details, all of it. I memorized the words like it was scripture. My heart should have been pounding, my hands should have been shaking, but there was only stillness. Only that low hum of electricity wrapping around my ribs and holding me steady. The TV had shown me the future. Again. And this time, it wasn't personal. It wasn't family or an old crush brushing her teeth or some kid crying in the backseat of a car. This was big. This was national, headlines. And I knew before anyone else did. I sat down slowly and leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I watched the footage one more time. The explosion, the chaos, the numbers, the names they hadn't said yet. I didn't blink. Something in my chest warmed. A quiet fire that didn't burn but smoldered. Deep, slow and comforting. This wasn't disturbing. This was clarity. This was power. I didn't sleep that night. Not in my bed, anyway. Sometime around 4 in the morning, I pulled a small cot from the attic. The same one Grandpa used to lay out when he napped between shifts at the shop. I carried it downstairs without thinking, the weight awkward in my hands, the legs scraping against the wall once or twice on the way down. I set it in the corner opposite the screen, just far enough that I could lie down and still see the glow from the TV. Still feel the soft wash of light on my face. Still hear the static, steady and low, humming like the sea in a seashell. I wrapped myself in an old blanket from the hall closet and lay down on that stiff cot, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The TV still flickered in the dark. It wasn't showing anything now, just static. Gentle, familiar. It didn't matter. I closed my eyes and let it lull me. That sound, the soft white hiss, wasn't noise anymore. It was music. 7:14 a.m. rolled around, and I kept my eyes on the corner of the screen, counting the seconds as they fell away like grains of sand in a collapsing hourglass. And there it was, right on time. The footage. The screen had shown me this. Not a guess, not a dream, but as a gift. I settled back down in the cot, knees drawn up, the blanket tucked under my chin. The screen had gone black. No static now. Just a silent glow pulsing like a heart. I whispered to it, "Thank you." And I swear I heard it hum back. The night before it spoke to me, I dreamed of wires. Black cords wrapped tight around my wrists, snaking up my arms like veins, humming with a low electric warmth. My hands moved on their own in the dream, splayed wide like I was reaching for something I couldn't see. But there was no fear. Just the hum. Just the pull. When I woke, I found myself still on the cot, eyes dry, mouth open, the TV softly glowing with that gray-white shimmer of static. And then it happened. No click, no flicker. Just words appearing across the screen in thin, flickering lines. Grainy. Like burned-in subtitles on a tape that had been watched too many times. You have seen. You have known. You have taken. I sat up slowly, the blanket falling from my shoulders, bones aching in the quiet. The static deepened, thickened. No longer just a hiss, but a presence, vibrating inside my skull like it was speaking from behind my eyes. The next line appeared slower now. Now, you will give. I didn't understand. Or maybe I did, but pretended not to. One for the eye, one for for the light. Bring flesh to the signal. The screen pulsed with each word, the static rising and falling like a breath. I stared at the glowing text until it burned into the backs of my eyes. And then in smaller letters, "The inspector comes Thursday. He will be the sacrifice." Just like the TV said, the man arrived late Thursday morning. His name was Travis. Mid-40s, maybe, with a clipboard tucked under one arm and steel-toed boots that thudded too loudly against the floorboards. He had a trimmed beard and wore a company jacket with a logo I didn't recognize. He smiled too wide, like he was used to disarming people. "I'm here to take a look around. Shouldn't take more than an hour," he said cheerfully. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. My hands were steady. My breath was even. The basement door was already open. He saved it for last. We walked through the bedrooms, the kitchen, the attic. I let him talk. I let him rattle off things about structural integrity, insulation, vent work, words that meant nothing now. I nodded when I had to. I led him like a shadow. When we reached the basement stairs, he hesitated. "Does it still get damp down here?" "Only when it rains." He gave a little laugh, more out of habit than humor, and started down the steps. The TV was already on. The screen flickered softly, a slow pulse of white light. The static was faint, barely there, but I could hear the edge of it, like a voice just behind the wall. Travis paused halfway down. "What is that?" He never got a chance to finish the sentence. I came up behind him quietly, the hammer already in my hand, the handle slick with sweat. The weight of it was perfect. Heavy enough to silence, small enough to feel intimate. When it connected with the back of his skull, the sound was quieter than I expected. A dull, wet crack that echoed like an apology that never left the lips. He slumped forward, legs folding beneath him like paper. The clipboard clattered to the floor. He didn't die right away. He made a sound, high and breathless. Not quite a word, not quite a scream, and tried to crawl, fingers scraping weakly against the concrete. I hit him again, and again, and again, until there was no more sound, no more movement. Only the hum of the television, louder now, almost excited. I stood over him for a long moment, breathing hard, blood spotting my sleeves, the hammer hanging loose in my hand like a forgotten tool. I felt clean, alive, like something inside me had finally opened, like I had stepped through some invisible threshold and found the world clearer on the other side. The TV pulsed. Good. The static rose, roaring now, almost musical, like it was celebrating. The signal deepens. The veil thins. Stay with us, Jonah. Soon, you will see it all. I dragged Travis's body to the far wall, covered it with a tarp. No one would have come looking for him yet. I knew that. I washed my hands in the utility sink. I went back to the cot, lay down, and watched the screen until I fell asleep. The white noise lulled me like a mother's voice, and the static whispered my name. I slept dreamlessly, wrapped in the glow of the television, surrounded by that soft, ever-present hiss that settled over my body like a blanket too warm to kick off. It wasn't until the light in the basement began to change, just slightly, just enough, that my eyes opened again, though I couldn't be sure of how long they'd been closed. The air was heavy, humming low in the back of my skull like a pressure headache I didn't entirely mind. I sat up slowly, the blanket sliding off my shoulders in a familiar way, and for a moment forgot where I was. Then I remembered the hammer, the blood, Travis. I turned toward the wall where I'd left his body, tucked beneath the heavy tarp like a thing to be shelved, cataloged and forgotten. But there was no tarp now. No blood, no body. Nothing but clean concrete, smooth and dull in the glow of the TV. And I knew. I didn't question it. I didn't even stand up. I knew that the television had taken him. The static deepened. The screen began to shift, no longer flickering or flashing or stuttering through images, but unfolding smoothly and deliberately, as if peeling back layers of glass in time. At first, I thought it was showing me another room, one I didn't recognize, long and dim, the walls covered in static that moved like breath. Then I saw the shape in the center of the frame, still, curled beneath a thin blanket. It was the basement, my basement, and the shape was me. I was looking at myself, but I wasn't asleep. I was awake. I could feel my own heartbeat. I could feel the cotton of the blanket pressing against my hands, but the screen showed me, sleeping, peacefully, silently, like I'd been that way for hours. My breath caught, not from fear, nothing so loud, but from a kind of internal shift. Like some part of me had stepped back and the rest was watching, trying to understand. I leaned in. The static thickened around the edges of the screen, the light warping gently as my face on the monitor began to change. Not drastically, not all at once, but subtly, terribly. My mouth began to part just a little too wide. My cheekbones stretched against the frame of my skull. My eyes opened and stared directly at me. The glow from the television intensified, bleeding into the room like fog, and I saw my reflection in the glass. Not the warped image of the virgin sleeping of me, but my actual reflection. It wasn't smiling. It wasn't angry. It simply looked still. Too still. Like it had been waiting. The screen pulsed beneath my gaze. Not a flicker, not a glitch. A heartbeat. I raised my hand without thinking, pressed my fingers against the glass. It wasn't cold. It was warm. It pulsed again. The hum rose through my bones, up my spine and behind my eyes. And then it pulled. Not physically at first. There was no violent suction, no sudden jolt. It was more like the floor around me had begun to tilt, just slightly, and I was sliding forward in a way that felt natural, inevitable, like a tide slowly reclaiming the shore. I didn't resist. I leaned in. The world around me, the cot, the basement, the walls, all of it began to fold inward, dissolving into the edges of the frame. My body lost its edges. My thoughts began to drift. I could still feel myself moving, but I couldn't say in which direction. I only knew I was going into something, through something. The last thing I saw before the light consumed me was the screen showing my face again, now smiling, calm and resigned, at peace. It was 3 days before Claire came by. She hadn't heard a word from me, not even a lazy thumbs up to her texts, which I used to send without thinking. At first, she figured I was just buried in boxes or grief or both. I had always shut down when things got heavy, disappearing into whatever corner felt safest. But the silence dragged on longer than it ever had before, and something in her gut told her it wasn't just a phase. Not a quiet week, not a mood. By the third day, the silence felt like a shape, like something waiting. She arrived just before noon, the sky a low sheet of unbroken gray, the kind that makes the world feel flatter and smaller. The house stood still at the edge of the street, shades drawn, driveway empty, that uneasy stillness pressing against the windows like fog. She knocked twice. No answer. She called my name once, then again louder. Her voice echoed softly against the siding, swallowed by the air. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was cool, dim. The air had that old electronics smell, dust worn by silent current, something faintly metallic curling beneath it. She walked through the rooms slowly, calling out as she went, expecting to hear footsteps creaking overhead or the murmur of a shower, maybe even the dull buzz of a radio. But there was nothing. No sign of movement. The kitchen was clean, the coffee pot was empty but recently used. There was still a faint ring of brown at the bottom. Upstairs, the bed hadn't been slept in, the bathroom light was off. Then she heard the first click. Soft, sharp, mechanical. It came from the floor below. Claire froze at the top of the basement stairs, one hand on the banister, listening. Another click, louder this time. Then a burst of static, quick and breathy, followed by silence. She called my name, a voice brittle now. No answer. Another click. The TV was turning on and off. She moved down the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath her weight. The air grew colder as she descended, not just temperature-wise, but in feeling, like walking into the mouth of something ancient and waiting. A draft she didn't notice upstairs now curled around her ankles like a warning. The light from the television pulsed faintly ahead, throwing warped shadows across the walls. The cot was empty, the blanket tossed aside. The floor was clean, no clutter, no mess. Nothing that told her I had been there recently at all. The television sat like an altar, screen blank. Then it clicked on. For a second, the screen flashed white with static. Then off again. Claire stopped at the base of the stairs. She didn't speak, didn't move closer yet. She just watched the television from across the room, every instinct telling her to turn back, but something deeper, the thing inside all of us that needs to know, told her to keep going. The screen stayed dark. She stepped forward, slow and careful. The concrete floor was cold through her shoes. Her breath made no sound. The screen clicked back on. Just more static. No images, no sound. Then it flickered again, harder this time, like something behind the screen had slammed against it. The glass held. The picture cut out. Claire stopped 2 feet from the screen, staring at her own warped reflection in the curved surface. The TV was off now, totally silent. Her face looked strange in the glass, slightly bloated, eyes stretching by the curvature of the screen. The room behind her bent at the edges. She reached out instinctively, not touching, just hovering her hand a few inches from the surface. Then the screen snapped on with a high electric crack. And there I was. Not a memory, not an image. Me. Staring straight at her from inside the screen. Pale. Eyes too wide. Still. My mouth barely parted. Like I had just started to speak. Or scream. And never finished. The image lasted less than a second. Then it was gone. The screen blacked out. No sound. Just Claire's reflection again. Eyes wider now, breath catching in her throat. Heart hammering in her chest loud enough to hear in her ears. She stumbled backward, nearly falling into the cot behind her, hands trembling at her sides. The room stayed silent. The TV didn't flicker again, but the static didn't leave her ears. She stood there for a long time watching the screen, waiting for it to come back on, waiting for it to show me. It didn't. But deep inside the glass, behind the warped reflection of her face, something shifted, like a shadow, like someone watching from the other side.